Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, being a Negro in America is not a comfortable existence. It means being a part of the company of the bruised, the battered, and the scarred. It means trying to smile when you want to cry, trying to hold on to physical life amid psychological death. It means the pain of watching your children grow up with clouds of inferiority in their mental skies. Being a Negro in America means having your legs cut off and then being condemned for being a cripple. It means seeing your mother and father spiritually murdered by the slings and arrows of daily exploitation. It means listening to suburban politicians talk eloquently against open housing while arguing in the same breath that they are not racist. It means being harried by day and haunted by night by a nagging sense of nobodiness, fighting the poison of bitterness. It means the ache and anguish of living in so many situations where hopes unborn have died. Dr. King's words express both the history and large reality of Black America. And while we have come a distance since the 1960s, it is evident that in many ways this country has not come far enough in the inclusion of African Americans and other minorities. Black History Month arose out of a need to express pride in Black history and to study and examine both the present and the future. And on behalf of the Black Students Association, the Black Law Students Association, and the W.E.B. Du Bois Graduate Society, I would like to thank you for being a part of our series on Black history and awareness. And I welcome you this evening to a lecture and discussion with Dr. Leonard Jeffries entitled The Significance of Black History. In formulating our series, I challenge you to examine your own sources of information. Today's media does not always accurately portray reality, especially with regard to Blacks. This is the same media that has and continues to exploit African Americans. And it's the same media that perpetuates the notion of white is good and Black is bad. Hence, it is our intent in our Black History and Awareness series to explore and examine viewpoints of a political, economic, cultural, and historic nature existing within the Black community for ourselves. And by no means does our invitation of any speaker represent any endorsement of any particular view, but more a quest for understanding and a quest for self-determination. Let me further mention that Dr. Leonard Jeffries, the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the late Malcolm X, and even bigger, and Richard Wright's novel, Native Son. These individuals are not the issue, but rather they are symptoms of the real issue. It is the underlying source, the source of frustration, racism, and anger that creates them, that must be attacked first and foremost. All of these individuals, though having different and varying viewpoints of history and the aims of the Black community, came from the exact same situation. We feel it is necessary to explore these and other varying viewpoints existing within the Black community to make some kind of sense of the past, the present, and the future. And Professor Jeffries is one speaker in our series. Dr. Jeffries joins Dr. Dorothy Blake Fardon, an author and noted sociologist, Lorraine Carey, a novelist and author of Black Eyes, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., chairman of Harvard's Afro-Am Studies Department, rap artist Chuck D, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, Dr. Charles Finch, Charlene Qualls, an artist in music and poetry, and several other speakers in our series. Professor Jeffries received his bachelor's degree from Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania in 1960. He received both his master's degree in 1963 and his doctorate degree in 1971 from Columbia University in New York. In July 1989, after being asked by the New York State Department of Education to join the Task Force on Educational Excellence, Dr. Jeffries became the chief evaluator of the New York State curriculum, resulting in a final report entitled Curriculum of Inclusion. Dr. Jeffries is currently a tenured professor and chairman of the Afro-American Studies Department at the City University of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Leonard Jeffries.
Good evening, and Hotep. Hotep is a greeting you'll often hear many of us use. It is from the language of the Africans of the Nile. It means peace, just as you might say, Assalamu alaikum or Shalom. And when someone greets you with Hotep, your response should be Hotep. Hotep, brothers and sisters.
Hotep.
It is certainly indeed a pleasure to be invited to the hallowed halls of Harvard. Because we have been invited to many universities across this land and overseas, Canada, as well as Australia, and we are visiting as many of these institutions of higher learning as possible. Why? Because it's important that the confusion, chaos, misinformation, disinformation, media campaign, media lynching that has been directed against me and others is clarified. Why? Because black youngsters, Latin youngsters, Asian youngsters that are in these institutions of higher education have to be fortified with a strength and an understanding that they have to have more than a mission to get a PhD or an LLD from Harvard or Yale, that they have to have a mission to become the change agents of this society and this world. That you stand in a tradition of enormity coming from your African experience that you need to fully appreciate and understand. And the status and the glamour of Harvard should not deter you from reaching and understanding that mission. So wherever we go, we have the same call to wake up the students, no matter what their color. Wherever we go, we say that you are to be honored. The African students at Harvard for resisting those forces, even in the highest levels of this administration, that might not have wanted to have the specter of discussion around some of the ideas that have been raised around Dr. Leonard Jeffries and other people dealing with African-centered education. You stand with the students of Columbia University, NYU, Ohio State, Howard University, the University of Maryland, the University of Michigan, various branches of the State University of New York, various branches of the City University of New York, Fordham, St. John's. You stand with all of these students, black, that demanded that the truth has to be heard and that the voice of dissent has to be made present in these universities. If a university is to fulfill its role as a great institution, then it must be the place where ideas, no matter how difficult, have to be discussed. So that's what we're here for tonight. But before we do anything important in the African tradition, and I stand in the African tradition in the continent of Africa, the African tradition in the Caribbean, the African tradition in Latin America, Brazil, the African tradition in America itself. Before anything important is done in that tradition, we pay homage to those who went before us. And in that tradition, a libation is a part of that process. And the libation involves pouring water to the ground, acknowledging that realm of the ancestors. Because before you went a whole host of others that laid a foundation for you. Not just W.E.B. Du Bois and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, but your great-great-grandparents went before you, and they should be acknowledged. So in the tradition, it's very simple. Water is poured to the ground, and the leader of the call for a moment of consciousness and spirituality elicits a response in the African tradition. So as the water is poured to the ground, you can respond by acknowledging it. It is done, or Ashe in the Yoruba tradition, or Yao in the Akan tradition, so be it, or Hotep in the African tradition of the Nile. But let's not have you sit there without anything to say, like Negroes of Boston and Cambridge.